Looking back, it's strange how the most meaningful chapters of your life often begin in the most ordinary ways. I met Elena 8 years ago at a friend's engagement party, the kind of event you don't expect much from. I remember I almost didn't go, had a long week at work, and was honestly in one of those moods where everything feels like a chore. But I went anyway, and I'm glad I did. She was sitting alone at the bar, sipping on something pink and icy, wearing this black floral dress and a pair of boots that didn't match at all, but somehow, they made perfect sense on her. We started talking because she commented on the drink I ordered. She called it a banker's cocktail, which I guess it was, just neat bourbon. One conversation turned into a 3-hour stretch of laughing, flirting, and getting very mildly judged by the bartender for taking up the whole end of the counter. It felt easy in a way nothing had before. We started dating within the week. I was 25 and working in a mid-level position at a regional bank. Nothing glamorous, but stable. Elena was 24, a graphic designer who had just started freelancing after quitting her job at a marketing firm. She was bold in ways I wasn't, willing to take creative risks, say what she meant, and live a little more chaotically than I did. I think I brought her steadiness. She brought me spark. We moved in together after a year, into this little brick house in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. She painted the living room this warm terracotta color, and I spent 2 weekends fixing the old wooden fence out back while she tried to train our golden retriever, Milo, not to eat the plants. We got married the following spring. Small ceremony, lots of homemade details. Her dad walked her down the aisle holding back tears while my brother couldn't stop grinning in the front row. Now, 5 years into marriage, our life looks cozy. Predictable in the way most people hope for. I still work at the bank, moved up a bit, nothing huge. Elena's freelance work really took off in the last couple of years. She does branding and website design mostly. Sometimes she gets flown out to pitch for big clients, which I always brag about more than she does. We have a rhythm. Coffee together in the mornings, gym on Tuesdays and Thursdays, movie night on Sundays. Sometimes she works late into the night in her home studio. We converted half the garage, and I'll bring her a cup of tea just so I have an excuse to see her smile through the mess of sketch pads and open tabs. We don't have kids yet. It's a topic that comes and goes. We agreed early on to wait until we felt completely ready. And honestly, we've built a life that feels full in its own way. Friends, travel, projects around the house that never seem to end. It's not a perfect life, but it's ours. And I thought it was a good one. One of the things people always said about us, especially in the first couple of years, was how balanced we seemed. I guess that's true in a way. Elena has always had this lightness about her. Not in the airheaded sense, but in the way she moved through the world like it didn't always have to be so heavy. She could laugh off small disasters, burnt dinners, missed exits, overbooked weekends, and I think being around her taught me to unclench a little. I used to be pretty rigid. I'm still organized to a fault, but with her, I let myself relax. We've created routines without really trying. Saturday mornings, we take Milo to the park for an hour and grab overpriced coffee afterward. She always gets the weird seasonal drinks, the kind that involve lavender syrup or oat milk foam, and I stick to my regular order. She teases me for being boring, but then always steals a sip of mine. We cook together most nights. She handles sauces and marinades. I do the chopping and timing. She's the better cook, but she says I'm better at precision, which I guess is just a nice way of saying I can follow a recipe without burning the garlic. Our house is a reflection of her more than me. She has this eye for detail, and our home shows it. Plants everywhere, shelves with framed prints, textures layered intentionally in ways I wouldn't even think of. I've contributed my share too, mostly the practical stuff. Organizing drawers, installing motion sensor lights in the hallway, making sure everything has its place. She laughs when I label bins, but I've caught her using the labels more than once. We travel when we can. Last year we went to Lisbon for a week. She fell in love with the tiles and brought home an entire suitcase full of ceramics, which are now carefully arranged above our kitchen cabinets. The year before, it was Vancouver. We talked about Japan, maybe next year, or Greece. She keeps a note on her phone titled Wanderlust List, and every so often, she'll come into the living room with a new entry and a hopeful look. I always say yes, even if we know it'll take a while to actually book anything. Career-wise, we're in a good place. My role at the bank is steady. I work in risk analysis, which isn't flashy, but it's comfortable and pays well. Elena's freelance gigs are thriving. Her work got picked up by a couple of well-known lifestyle brands, and she's been getting consistent clients through referrals. Sometimes I hear her on video calls, pitching ideas with that confident, slightly sarcastic voice she uses when she's excited. I'm proud of her. Always have been. We've even talked, more seriously lately, about kids again. Not in a concrete way, no calendars or appointments yet, but more like a door we both might want to open. She once said, while we were folding laundry, that she could picture us with a daughter who had my nose and her stubbornness. I laughed and said that sounded dangerous, but the image stuck with me. From the outside, and honestly, from the inside too, it looks like a good life. And I believed it was. I really did. I've always been the kind of guy who doesn't make a big deal out of anniversaries or milestones, not because I don't care, but because I've always believed that consistency mattered more than grand gestures. Elena was the opposite. She marked time like it was sacred. She remembered the first time I brought her soup when she was sick, the date we adopted Milo, even the exact day we finished painting our bedroom ceiling, a stupid project that turned into a full weekend ordeal involving neck cramps and a paint-splattered dog. She kept a journal full of those memories. She called them our little threads, like the stuff that wove our life together. Looking back, maybe that's what made us work so well. I grounded her, and she reminded me to see the small joys I might otherwise miss. There was a period, about 2 years ago, when things felt almost too perfect. Work was good, money wasn't tight, and we'd just redone the kitchen. We hosted friends often, started talking about maybe taking a sabbatical one year to travel more. She even floated the idea of moving to the coast someday. She always talked about the coast like it was a different world, somewhere quieter, where she could work barefoot on a porch and I could finally learn how to grill something without Googling every step. There were little rituals we kept, even in the monotony of daily life. Every Thursday, I'd pick up takeout from this tiny Thai place on my way home, and we'd watch reruns of The Office with our legs tangled on the couch. She always stole the last crab rangoon and acted surprised every time I called her out on it. On Sundays, I made us breakfast, eggs, toast, fresh coffee, while she read the paper on her iPad and talked to Milo like he was a small, hairy roommate. We were, in every way that counted, a unit. And she was affectionate, not just physically, though there was plenty of that, but in the little ways. Notes in my work bag. A hand on my arm when I was stressed. Random texts just to say she missed me. I returned it in my own way. I took care of the bills, the yard, the errands she hated. I was the quiet supporter, the one making sure the machine ran so she could be the spark that made it all feel alive. We didn't fight much. And when we did, it was usually over something minor, me forgetting to fold the laundry or her getting distracted in the middle of telling me something important. The kind of friction that smooths itself out with a long hug or a joke that lands just right. I always felt like we could work through anything because we were on the same team. I believed in us. Deeply. Unquestioningly. If you'd asked me then to name the safest place in my world, I'd have said her, without hesitation. And maybe that's why what came next hit me the way it did. It was a Thursday afternoon when Elena called me at work. I remember the exact moment because I was on a call with a client, and I let it go to voicemail at first. But she immediately texted, "Call me back when you get a sec. It's important." Not bad, just important. I stepped into the hallway, heart in my throat. Important can mean a lot of things. I wasn't expecting her voice to come through the line breathless and trembling with a mix of shock and something else I couldn't place. "I'm pregnant," she said. I leaned against the wall, silent for a second too long. I wasn't sure if I'd heard her right. We talked about kids, dreamed about it even, but lately, those conversations had been abstract, distant. She hadn't been on birth control for a while, and neither of us had been overly cautious, but still, it caught me off guard. I think the first thing I said was, "Are you sure?" Not out of disbelief, but just trying to find my footing. She laughed a little, nervous. I took 3 tests. "I'm sure." I drove home early that day. She was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket like she'd been waiting there the whole time. Her eyes were wide and searching. I remember hugging her and kissing her hair and saying, okay, we can do this." I meant it. I did. Even with the shock, I felt something soft open up in me, something tender and full of hope. It wasn't how I pictured the moment would happen, but it was real. And it was ours. The next few weeks were a blur of quiet excitement. We didn't tell anyone yet, not even our families. Elena said she wanted to wait until after the first ultrasound, just to be safe. She started tracking everything, what she ate, how much she slept, what vitamins she needed. She downloaded 4 different apps and started reading blogs with titles like Things I Wish I Knew Before My First Trimester. It felt surreal, watching her get pulled into this new world. I hovered just behind her, trying to be supportive, trying to understand what she needed without crowding her. She was more emotional, suddenly tearing up at commercials, sometimes quiet for long stretches. I chalked it up to hormones. That's what the books said, right? She also started going on more solo walks, saying she needed fresh air or time to clear her head. Again, I didn't question it. If anything, I wanted to give her space to adjust. Pregnancy is massive. A whole identity shift. I figured she needed room to process it. But I also started feeling like I was on the outside of something I used to be part of. She was more withdrawn, more guarded. Nothing major, just subtle. When I reached for her at night, she'd turn away, saying she was too tired or her stomach fell off. She started locking her phone more. Her laughter came less easily. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. I believed this was just the beginning of a new phase, that we were both adjusting in our own ways, that this child, our child, was going to bring us even closer together. I had no idea what was coming. At first, I told myself it was just the pregnancy. The mood swings, the fatigue, the distance, all of it could be explained away. That's what every book, every website, every Reddit comment said. The first trimester is hard. Give her space. Don't take it personally. So I tried. I really did. But something shifted between us. Something I couldn't quite name. It started small. Elena stopped joining me for our evening walks with Milo. She said her back was bothering her, or she felt nauseous, which made perfect sense until it kept happening. Then she stopped doing her late-night tea ritual, the one where she'd brew chamomile and sit on the couch with her legs tucked under her, half listening while I talked about work. Now she'd just say, "I'm heading to bed," and disappear upstairs. I chalked it all up to stress. Pregnancy can do weird things. I knew that. I was patient. I bought her favorite snacks, made sure the house stayed quiet when she napped, picked up books on parenting, even surprised her with a massage pillow when she complained about sore hips. She said thank you. She smiled, but it felt like a smile that belonged to someone else. One night, she was in her studio, doors shut, music on. I knocked and poked my head in to ask if she wanted dinner. She barely looked up from her screen and just said, "Not hungry." I glanced at her laptop. She quickly minimized something, and I don't know why, but it stuck with me. A flicker. A moment. I didn't ask about it. I told myself it was probably a client file or something personal she didn't want to share. Elena values her space. She's always been protective of her creative work, and I've always respected that. Still, I walked away with a knot in my stomach I couldn't explain. Then there was the night we went to her OB appointment. It was a routine checkup, but afterward, she said she didn't feel like going out to lunch as planned. "Can we just go home?" she asked, fidgeting with her phone. She was texting someone. I caught the glow of the screen, but she tilted it just enough to keep it out of view. It shouldn't have meant anything. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt like a guest in my own marriage. I didn't tell anyone how I was feeling, not even my brother, who I usually open up to about this kind of stuff. Because what was I going to say? "Hey, I think my pregnant wife is distant?" I felt crazy for even thinking it. I had no reason to be suspicious. No evidence. Just a collection of moments that didn't add up the way they used to. One night, I asked her if she was happy. She looked at me like I'd asked if she still believed in gravity. Of course I'm happy. Why wouldn't I be? I didn't know how to answer that. I just nodded and smiled like an idiot and said, "Just checking." But that night, I barely slept. I lay awake next to her, listening to her breathe, and wondering when exactly the air between us had changed. There's something uniquely exhausting about wondering if you're imagining things. That's where I found myself, stuck between trust and intuition, bouncing back and forth like a pinball. I wasn't looking for problems, truly. I just kept stumbling into moments that left me unsettled. Take last weekend, for example. Elena said she wanted some time to herself. Totally fair. Pregnancy is overwhelming, and I get that she needs space to breathe. So I took Milo out for a long hike, left her the house, even grabbed her a decaf latte on the way home because I know she misses the caffeine. When I got back, the house was quiet. Her studio door was open, but she wasn't in there. I called her name, and she came out of our bedroom, hair still damp from a shower. Nothing unusual. But she jumped slightly, just enough to notice. She laughed and said she thought I weren't back for another hour. I asked if everything was okay, and she just smiled and said, "Yeah, just relaxing." I didn't push it, but something about her tone didn't match the words. Later that evening, we sat on opposite ends of the couch. I was scrolling through vacation rentals. I'd been thinking we could use a little getaway, just the two of us before the baby came. I suggested a cabin upstate. Something quiet, no Wi-Fi, just books and fireplaces. She glanced up from her phone and gave me a thin smile. Let's talk about it later. Okay. She used to light up at the idea of those kinds of trips. Now it felt like I was asking her to help me move furniture. And the phone, God, the phone. I'm not someone who goes through their partner's messages. I've never even been tempted. But now I started noticing how tightly she held on to it. If she left it in a room, it was always face down. She kept her notifications off. Sometimes, she'd be mid-text and stop talking to me completely, like the message took all her attention. One night she left it on the nightstand while she was brushing her teeth. A message came in, just a name I didn't recognize and a single heart emoji. I didn't touch it. I didn't even move. I stared at it like it was a loaded weapon and pretended I hadn't seen it when she came back. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I'm going insane. I've started keeping more to myself. I'm afraid that if I bring up how I'm feeling, she'll think I'm accusing her of something. And I'm not. I don't have anything solid. Just a gut feeling I can't seem to shut off. And then there's the baby. That changes everything. I'm supposed to be her partner in this, her support system. But sometimes I look at her and feel like I'm standing outside a house I used to live in, watching someone I love move room to room, behind glass, never quite looking back at me. I haven't told anyone about any of this. What would I even say? All I know is the silence between us is getting louder. I don't know when I stopped asking questions and started collecting silences. Lately, that's all our conversations feel like, surface-level noise over something much heavier beneath. She still talks to me, still kisses my cheek when I leave for work, still laughs at Milo's weird habits. But none of it feels quite real anymore. Or maybe I just don't trust the feeling. A few nights ago, I tried to initiate something, nothing major, just a quiet moment. I placed my hand on her stomach while we were watching a movie, and she flinched. Not dramatically. Not like she was in pain. Just a quick, instinctive pullback. I pretended not to notice, but it stayed with me for hours afterward. She said she was tired. She always is these days. I get it. Pregnancy changes your body, your energy, everything. I keep telling myself that. But this doesn't feel like exhaustion. It feels like evasion. I also started noticing that her schedule has shifted, without any real explanation. She's out more often now, late afternoon walks that last longer than usual, quick errands that take hours. I asked once, casually, "Where'd you end up going today?" She rattled off a list of shops, but her voice was too fast, like she was already moving past the question before it landed. She's also been on her laptop more often in the evenings. The screen always angled slightly away from me. Sometimes I hear her typing rapidly, then clicking to close something when I walk by. One time, she forgot to plug in her charger, and the laptop died mid-session. She let out this sharp curse and immediately reached for her phone, opening it like she needed to finish a conversation elsewhere. I didn't say anything. I just brought her the charger. That's the worst part, maybe. How quiet I've gotten. Not because I'm indifferent, but because I'm afraid of where my questions might lead. What if I'm wrong? What if this is just a rough patch and I've made myself paranoid over nothing? Or, what if I'm right? I've started withdrawing. I stay late at work, take longer walks with Milo. I've stopped suggesting trips or talking about baby names. When I look at her now, I feel a strange ache, like something precious is slipping through my fingers, and I can't even name what it is. She's still beautiful, still vibrant in her way, but the warmth between us feels manufactured, like she's performing a version of closeness she no longer feels. Last night, I dreamed we were at the beach, one of those gray, quiet beaches where the waves drag slow and heavy. She was standing at the edge of the water, barefoot, cradling her belly. I called her name, but she didn't turn around, just kept walking farther into the tide. I woke up with the sheets tangled around me, my chest tight, and the clock blinking 3:17 a.m. I watched her sleep for a while. Peaceful, closed off, unreachable. Something is wrong. I can feel it in my bones. But I still don't know what. Sometimes the truth doesn't come crashing in. It just slips through a crack you didn't know was there. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I came home early from work because I had a splitting headache and figured I could finish some reports from the kitchen. When I walked in, the house was empty. Elena's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't in her studio. The bedroom was dark. Milo was asleep on the rug, unmoved. It was quiet in a way that made the air feel heavy. I set my laptop down, took something for the headache, and went to make coffee. That's when I heard her voice, muffled, coming from the other room. I paused. She was on the phone in the living room, pacing near the back door with her Bluetooth in. I didn't mean to listen. I swear I didn't. I was just standing there, frozen, when I heard her say, "Yeah, I'll text it to you. It's the same one I use for everything. He still doesn't know it." She laughed. A soft, casual laugh. I don't know what possessed me in that moment. Maybe it was all the build-up, weeks of quiet tension, tiny moments that didn't sit right. I didn't even think. I went to the bedroom, opened her laptop, and typed in the password she had just said out loud. It unlocked instantly. I sat there, not really knowing what I was doing. I wasn't expecting to find anything. Or maybe part of me was. I clicked through files, messages, browser history. Most of it was nothing. Work projects, Pinterest boards, articles on pregnancy. Then I saw the folder. It was buried inside another folder, labeled something benign, Q3, invoices. Inside were screenshots, videos, chats. Some deleted, some saved under different names. I don't know why she didn't clear it all. Maybe she got careless. Or maybe she thought I'd never look. The first file I opened was a video. I didn't even realize what I was looking at right away. It was the two of them, Elena and someone else, laughing on a couch, a familiar blanket draped behind them. Then she leaned in and kissed him. Full, deep, intimate, like I didn't exist. And then I realized who he was. My father. My own goddamn father. I shut the laptop and stood up so fast I nearly knocked the chair over. My ears were ringing. The walls felt like they were moving. My vision narrowed into this sharp tunnel of disbelief. I wanted to scream, or throw something, or disappear. Instead, I just stood there, motionless, while Milo came over and nudged my hand like he could feel it, like he knew something had shattered inside me. Everything fell into place all at once. Her distance, the secrecy, the pregnancy. I didn't want to think it. I really didn't. But the timeline suddenly made too much sense. I sat back down, reopened the folder, and clicked through every message, every photo, every disgusting bit of it. They'd been meeting for months. She'd even saved a note to herself about changing her story if I ever asked too many questions about the due date. It was all there. All of it. I closed the laptop. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I couldn't. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to breathe without choking. I took Milo for a walk that lasted 2 hours. I don't remember the route. I don't remember the people I passed. Just the sound of my own heartbeat, thudding behind my ribs like it was trying to break free. I didn't cry. Not yet. That came later. When I got home, Elena was in the kitchen making tea like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just burned our entire life to the ground. She smiled at me. "Hey, you okay? You look pale." I stared at her. Really stared. And in that moment, I understood something I never thought I'd have to learn. The person you trust most in the world can destroy you with a secret smile. There are different kinds of betrayal. The slow erosion kind, where someone you love gradually drifts away and you barely notice until it's too late. And then there's the other kind, the violent kind. The kind that rips the floor out from under you in one instant and leaves you staring at the wreckage of everything you thought was solid. That's what this was. What she did. What they did. It took me 2 days to act. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed time. I needed to be smart. I needed to be sure that when I moved, it would be permanent. Final. I didn't want yelling or chaos. I didn't want to give them a moment to play the victim or twist the story. I just wanted the truth to land on their heads like a steel beam. On the morning I chose, I waited for Elena to go to the doctor's appointment she'd scheduled. I knew she'd be gone for at least an hour. As soon as she left, I changed the locks. I packed up every piece of her clothing, every piece of jewelry, every photo, every object that had her handwriting on it, and stuffed them into suitcases. I put them on the porch and sent her a single message: "Don't come back. Everything you left is outside. The locks are changed. I know everything. I'm done." I turned off my phone, let it buzz in another room while I sat at the dining table in complete silence, drinking a glass of water like I was preparing for war. Then I got to work. I work in a bank. I don't talk about it much because it's never felt relevant. But I have certain clearances, certain tools. And more importantly, I know exactly where my father keeps his money and how he moves it. Over the next 3 hours, I froze every account that had my name attached to his or Elena's. Anything joint, anything I had legal access to, it was shut down. Cards deactivated. transfers reversed. I even had our legal team initiate a compliance review on one of my father's business accounts under the pretense of suspicious activity. It bought me time and froze the capital flow temporarily. His business, some fancy little property venture he brags about at family dinners, relies on liquidity. And I cut the pipeline dry in less than a day. I made it surgical. No drama. No outbursts. Just clean, deliberate silence. Later that evening, the texts turned frantic. Elena had finally seen the suitcases. She called me 17 times in a row. Then came the guilt tactics. Please just talk to me. We can fix this. Followed by the gaslighting. I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what it looks like. And then, when that didn't work, the last-ditch panic. Where am I supposed to go? I don't have anything right now. That's when I blocked her. An hour later, my dad called. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened back, it was just him breathing, then saying, "We need to talk, son." No apology. Not even an ounce of remorse. Just the old tone he always used, like I owed him an explanation for being angry that he slept with my wife. I didn't respond to him either. The next day, I got a message from my dad's secretary, asking if I could urgently call back about a banking issue. Apparently, he'd been locked out of 3 business cards and a line of credit he wasn't aware I still had control over. I never replied. Instead, I looped in our corporate compliance lead and told her I suspected internal misuse. She flagged it as a red alert. The account was frozen again. He'll lose the business in a matter of weeks if he can't access those funds. I know this because he leveraged heavily on a short-term property deal, and I was the one who helped him set it up last year. His entire empire is built on arrogance and short-term margins. Elena, meanwhile, will find her accounts mysteriously unusable. I had already removed her as an authorized user on my credit cards and reported the joint ones as compromised. I transferred my personal funds into an entirely new account under a different institution and closed out everything else. All legal, all traceable, all irreversible. By nightfall, the quiet felt like a victory. I didn't do any of this because I thought it would make me feel better. I'm not under any illusions that revenge can stitch a broken heart. But I needed them to feel it. I needed them to understand that what they did came with consequences. That I wasn't the fool they assumed I'd always be: compliant, quiet, forgiving. No. That man died the moment I saw their messages, their pictures, their carelessness. They both tried to break me. Instead, I cut them off at the root. And now? Now they're scrambling, confused, desperate. Just like I was. For the first time in months, I woke up without the feeling of dread sitting on my chest like a stone. It wasn't peace, not quite. More like emptiness, but the kind that has room for something else to grow. The noise had quieted. The questions had stopped. I wasn't spinning through what-ifs or picturing them anymore. My house was just my house again. My mind, finally, belonged to me. I moved out of the place we shared 2 weeks after I cut her off. I didn't want the walls anymore. I didn't want the bed where I once pictured our future or the hallway where I used to hear her laughter from the studio. So I sold it. Fast. Below value, just to be done. Now I live in a small apartment downtown. It's not impressive, bare walls, simple furniture, only the essentials. But it's quiet. Mine. I keep the windows open, even at night. I like the city sounds, distant traffic, late-night footsteps on pavement, the low hum of life continuing. It reminds me that the world didn't end. It just changed. I joined a gym again, one that's open early, mostly empty. I go before work, throw myself into motion, let my muscles burn until all I can think about is the next rep. I started reading again too. And cooking for myself. Not to impress anyone, not even to feel productive. Just to prove to myself that I still care about living well. And then, slowly, without warning, someone new entered my life. Her name is Maya. We met at the park while I was walking Milo. She had a black lab named Cassie, who immediately took interest in Milo's tennis ball. We struck up a conversation. It wasn't anything remarkable at first. Just dog talk, weather, awkward jokes. But she had this calm to her, an unforced kindness that didn't push for more than what the moment offered. She didn't know my story. I didn't know hers. We saw each other again. And again. Eventually, I asked if she wanted to grab coffee. She said yes. I haven't told her everything yet. Not about Elena. Not about my father. Not about the parts of me that are still bruised, still afraid to trust what feels good. But I told her enough to let her in a little. She didn't flinch. She didn't pity me. She just listened, quiet, patient, present. That was enough. We've gone on 4 dates now. Each one simple. No big declarations, no pressure to define anything. Just two people trying to enjoy a version of life that doesn't hurt. I don't know what this is yet, and I'm not rushing to name it, but I feel lighter when I'm with her. And for now, that's more than enough. Sometimes I look at Milo curled up by the window, his tail thumping softly in his sleep, and I realize we're okay. Not perfect, not healed, but okay. The betrayal didn't end me. The worst thing that ever happened to me was also the thing that finally woke me up. And in the quiet aftermath, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It's strange how fast a life can unravel, and how slowly you stitch something new from the scraps. It's been 6 months since everything fell apart. That number feels surreal when I say it out loud. Half a year since the day I found out. Since I kicked her out. Since I blocked my father, closed the doors behind me, and refused to look back. And yet here I am, not just surviving, but still standing. Still breathing. Still choosing. There was a time, not long ago, when I thought healing meant forgiveness. That I'd have to let Elena back into my heart in some small way, or that I'd have to hear my father out to find peace. But I've learned that healing isn't about reopening doors. It's about locking them, placing the key somewhere you'll never reach again, and learning to live with the silence on the other side. Elena reached out a few times in the weeks after I shut her out. First with apologies. Then excuses. Then desperation. She told me she didn't know what she was thinking. That it was a moment of weakness. That it didn't mean anything. And when I didn't respond, she tried guilt. The baby deserves a family, she wrote in one email. I didn't answer. I don't know if the child is mine. I had already started the legal process to request a paternity test, but I stopped it halfway through. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't raise a child under the shadow of that betrayal. I wouldn't tie myself to that lie, her lie, for the rest of my life. I left that decision in the hands of attorneys in time. As for my father, he went silent once he realized the financial fallout wasn't something he could manipulate or charm his way out of. I've heard whispers that he had to sell off assets, that his business partner left, that he's struggling to stay afloat. Part of me expected to feel triumphant. I didn't. It felt empty. Just like he always was. Maya and I are still seeing each other. Slowly. Gently. There's something sacred about how careful we are with each other. Two people who've seen the worst and are still daring to believe in the possibility of good. She knows more now. About the betrayal. About the baby. About the ache I carry in quiet moments I don't know how to name. She never tries to fix it. She just stays. I've learned to appreciate that more than any grand gesture. People ask me now how I'm doing. The truth? I'm not great. I'm not thriving. But I'm honest. I sleep better. I laugh more. I stopped checking my phone for messages I knew weren't coming. I stopped wondering where it all went wrong, and started accepting that sometimes it just does, and that doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. I used to feel ashamed. Like being cheated on, especially in the way I was, somehow reflected on me. That I'd been too naive, too trusting, too blind. But now I see that trusting someone fully is not a flaw. It's a strength. The flaw was never in me. It was in the people who saw love as something they could use. Would I change what happened? Of course. But I wouldn't trade who I'd become for who I was back then. That man loved deeply, yes, but he didn't know how to protect his own peace. Now I do. This isn't a redemption story. It's just my story. Messy. Real. Ongoing. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like mine again.